What's cracking? Welcome to Griffin and Bass. He's Griffin, I'm Bass. Before we get into everything regarding this Lions debacle at Foxborough this past weekend, got to remind you guys to like and subscribe everywhere you can find us. That'd be on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And we got full episodes on YouTube as well as DetroitSportsNation.com. All right, Ryan. The Lions went to Boston, went on out to Foxborough, and got completely owned by Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, 29-0. The vaunted offense that was leading the NFL coming into the game walked out with just as many points as they had scored all season going into the game after leaving the game. That, in my mind, actually looked better. They held the Patriots to field goals throughout, one offensive touchdown in the second half, but that was it. I thought they did a better job of keeping them out of the end zone. The Pats have struggled this year in the red zone in general, but it was nice to see that the Pats didn't improve how they did in the red zone after leaving this game with the Lions. One touchdown for the Patriots offensively, obviously the defensive one on the scoop and score off the Jared Goff fumble made it a bigger score. A lot of people out there screaming for everybody's heads, from Dan Campbell to Aaron Glenn, you name it. They're out there in droves now screaming to get this regime out of here and bring in the next regime already in game 22 of the Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes era. So before I get into everything that I saw from this game, what were your takeaways from this weekend's game in Foxborough?
So this weekend, I thought, is what I thought last week was going to look like with the offense, because in this weekend they had Amon-Ra St. Brown, but before that, when they're missing St. Brown and they're missing DeAndre Swift, they're missing DJ Chark, like all these other weapons, and you're thinking it's not going to go well, and then they score 45 points, and then it's, oh, this offense can do anything with anybody. And then this week, you have like just a crashing back to earth moment where the offense goes out, and not only do they get shut out, they get outscored by New England's defense 7-0, and it's a week where you're going up against a third-string quarterback. So the defense had their best week, but you should have your best week going up against a third-string rookie quarterback who, by no plans, was supposed to take any type of snaps this year. And they did, right? They gave up 22 points, which should be enough to win you a game in the NFL if your defense is only going to give the other team 22. Obviously, the Lions didn't score at all. So I understand where the frustration comes, and it's really the worst game that the Lions have played all year, and it's probably the game that they were most expected to win. Maybe the Commanders game, which they actually did end up winning, but out of the first 5 games, this was the one that should have been a cakewalk, where you saw Bailey Zappe and you saw the fact that you had Amon-Ra St. Brown back. And I know the Lions were still underdogs in the game, but I felt better going against New England than I did against Seattle, and obviously it didn't work out that way at all.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of Lions fans made the same, for lack of a better term, mistake that you made in assuming that going up against Bill Belichick is a win. Like, that hasn't been the case for very many teams very often, even with, I understand, Tom Brady and that offense being gone, and they really have not rebuilt that offense yet. Their offensive weapons are just not there. They have a running situation that's nice. Their wide receivers, we talked about this last week, they don't really have a number one. They have a whole bunch of 2s and 3s that they piece together. The tight ends, Hunter Henry and them, have not panned out the way that people thought they would when they joined the New England Patriots. But it's still, if not the greatest head coach of all time, one of the greatest, and definitely the greatest modern head coach of all time in the NFL. And I don't think there's a better coach out there to take away your strengths and attack your weaknesses than Bill Belichick, even with a team not as good as he's accustomed to, not as good as New England in general is accustomed to. They have been ridiculously good for the last 20-plus years. But to have a coach who can scheme and plan like Bill Belichick can, it's a tall task for anybody. And I am not surprised in the least bit that our brand new head coach had circles run around him by Bill Belichick and his coach. Everyone was so focused on Matt Patricia and getting revenge at Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia, I don't think he does anything for the New England Patriots. I know he's there on the sideline, and I made this joke online, but I understand, but he's supposed to be doing. I think he's there more like a Make-A-Wish kid, and like And Belichick just has him on the sideline because he likes the poor guy. I don't know what he actually does, but on the defensive side of the ball, which is where apparently he came from, they're not letting him touch, and they put him on the offensive side of the ball. And Bill Belichick, who has been a defensive genius since the 80s with the New York Football Giants, did what he does. And when you watch this game and you look at the trenches, this game was completely won and lost right then and there. New England Patriots dominated the Detroit Lions. When the Lions had the ball, their D-line dominated our O-line. When they had the ball, their O-line dominated our D-line. So right there in the trenches is all you need to look at for me. We can talk about everything else that happened, but in the trenches, which is where this game matters and where we've talked about where I want to see the Lions building their team from the inside out, and they have been doing that. Obviously, people aren't happy with what's happened so far, but they have been building it, in my mind, the right way from the trenches out. We got completely embarrassed, completely dominated by a brilliant football mind and a better team when you look at what they pieced together to be able to do against a new young head coach, a new young regime, and they made Jared Goff look foolish. They got pressure on him all day, and he made bad read after bad read with pressure in his face, and they completely took advantage of it.
They did take advantage, and I know you mentioned it when we talked about this on Friday, was just the coaching advantage that the Patriots had. And I thought the coaching advantage would be canceled out by the fact that they had a third-string quarterback. It most certainly was not. And Dan Campbell, outside of just calling plays, because I know he doesn't call plays or call the defense or do anything really, but like calling the 4th and 9, that the Lions are down 6-0, it's a 48-yard field goal, and you just signed your kicker, Badgley, this week. And if you're not going to trust them to kick a 48-yard field goal, then what'd you sign him for? And again, dude, it's 4th and 9, so you're not going to get it. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, it's 4th and 1, and the numbers told us we had a better shot of getting 4th and 1 than we did of making this field goal. That I understand. But at that point, the Patriots had kicked 2 field goals themselves, so it's not like they were moving the ball down the field. And if you can't kick a 48-yard field goal, then one, why are you signing a kicker really in the first place if you're not going to trust them to make that kick? And I thought that decision was just astounding, honestly. It was befuddling. And I know we're going to talk about the rebuild a little bit later, but it's one of those things that makes you lose faith in Dan Campbell because it's happened last year and it happens this year, and he goes in every press conference and says, oh man, I wish I had that one back. Well, stop doing it.
No, I hear you. And there were some questionable calls that Dan Campbell made. That 4th and 9 was really the only egregious one, because you're right. You did just sign Michael Badgley from the Bears, who he just had made 4 field goals for them last week while he was filling in for Santos, and that's why he was let go. And that was the one. But there were other ones as well. The first, was it the first one? Yeah, so the first 4th down they went for. It's half a yard, all right? And they went for the inside handoff instead of a quarterback sneak. I don't understand going backwards to try and go forward. It's never made sense to me. When you have to get literally less than 3 feet, you're the quarterback, fall forward. That's all you have to do to get the first down at that point. I know I'm making it sound simple. It's not simple. But the idea to go backwards 2 yards, to hand it to a running back, to then go back forward those plus yards, that one didn't make sense to me. The 4th and 9 is the only one where it was a little bit in no man's land. Yeah, it was right around the 33-yard line, which gives you about a 50-yard field goal, 48 like you said. And maybe he's just shell-shocked by how bad the kicking has been so far since he's been with the Lions. They just haven't had a long, consistent kicker. Obviously, he's only been here for 22 games like we said. But in that time period, the kicking situation has been spotty at best. But you're right. You signed a kicker for a reason. Utilize him. That one is the one that stands out. But the other 4th downs that they went for throughout this game, and everyone wants to pick them apart for going 0 for 6 on 4th down. Every other 4th down to me made sense. The first one, I just didn't like the play call, but it made sense. The third 4th down is 4th and 2 from the Pats' 35-yard line. Again, it's a 52-yard field goal, and Goff missed horribly the play before on 3rd and 2. He passes it short of the sticks, doesn't get the first down. Terrible play, either terrible execution or terrible design, one way or the other. Throw it on the players or throw it on him. The 4th down they went for is 4th and goal from the 6 later in the game. It's a pass to Amon-Ra. He's heavily covered. It bounces off his chest. It wouldn't matter if he had grabbed it anyway. There were 3 Patriots around him. He wasn't getting into the end zone. So the plays that you're running, even if they're called and they're the right play, they're not being executed correctly, and you're putting yourself in a hole with this as well. There was There were brain-dead moves by the coaching staff for sure, and by the players for sure. You can attribute that to the youngness of our head coach, the fact that he was a former football player, so he's headstrong and he always wants to go for it. I don't know, but you're absolutely right that in the moment, he has made mistakes. And there needs to be not just accountability, but a rectifying of that. And I'm not saying fire him. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. I don't want him fired. I want to see this play out a lot longer than just the 22 games that we've seen so far. But there needs to be someone there. Who was the head coach? Was it McVay that had a guy that would hold him back and keep him away from the sideline? Some head coach in the NFL, I think it was McVay, where he had like a strength and conditioning coach that would just pull him away from the... Campbell needs a guy like that says, Coach, kick the damn ball. Or coach, do this, coach, do, like, just every once in a while to get Campbell out so he can get out of his own way, because he wants to win and do this so badly, but he makes these mistakes on the field that are so costly.
So apparently they have somebody like that, and I don't know the gentleman's name, but they were talking about it on the radio probably about a week and a half ago. And it's essentially, it's like a football consultant, but his job is supposed to be, because you see other teams have it, like these sort of game situation gurus, and a lot of teams, it's not just the Lions, a lot of teams mess up these late game situations or these fourth down situations. So it's not a Lions specific problem, but I would say Dan Campbell is probably just one of the worst at it in the entire league. So it's not something new, right? It's not something that would be cutting edge, and it's, oh my God, why didn't anybody ever think of this? The Lions supposedly have one. I don't know that gentleman or woman should have a job right now based on what we've seen transpire. But I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the team is doing, or how you don't get this right, because it seems like, and look, we're fans. Everybody, armchair quarterback, right? You look at home and you're like, oh, you just easily do that. How'd you miss that dude streaking up the sideline, X, Y, and Z? And while that's not always wrong, right, and sometimes there is some merit to that, like the play calling one, it just seems like it should be easier, at least the decision making, not even the actual calling of the play, but like, hey, you should definitely kick a field goal right here for X, Y, and Z reason. And then when the team doesn't, and obviously it's going to backfire, it's just super frustrating, and I can see why fans are honestly starting to lose their patience with it. But I will say, I think I have a way for the Lions to get out of this hell that we're in. Because I know you subscribe to this, and just talks that we've had privately is, as frustrating as the Lions have been throughout the Dan Campbell era, 3 wins last year, doesn't look like they're going to get a whole lot more than that this year with the way things are going. You feel like this rebuild is different than the rebuilds in the past. You feel differently about Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes than you did Quinn Trisha, or than you did Mayhew and Schwartz, or Mayhew and Caldwell.
I do. I said it through all of our time on the Sports Carnage podcast, when it was still relevant at the time. It was when William Clay Ford was the owner, that as long as William Clay Ford was the owner, the Lions were never going to do anything, because William Clay Ford didn't give a damn about the football team, didn't give a damn about the city of Detroit. He liked to fill his pockets, and that's all he got out of it. And all you have to do is go look at the renewal contract that he gave to Matt Millen after he was literally the worst in the history of his job in the NFL after 5 years. And William Clay Ford gave him a 5-year extension. Now, he was fired in his 3rd year of that 5-year extension, thank God. But you can't do that. You cannot give a guy a 5-year extension when he is literally the worst in the history of his job title, which is what Matt Millen was. So for me, it was, until William Clay Ford is gone, the Lions aren't going to do anything. I have felt different about this regime and this rebuild because Sheila went for outside help. She went to Spielman. She went to Barry Sanders. She went to people that were going to be outside the organization. It is outside help. I don't think these guys were ever consulted before in any way, shape, or form. I think she took an outside look at things as far as that we need to find people that know the game and know what they're doing. And yeah, obviously getting a voice of a legend who might not be working so much in the game a la Barry Sanders isn't going to be all that helpful. But getting a different taste in general for what you're doing, to me, is helpful. Getting an outside opinion on what's going on. Because what we've been doing ain't working. And here's what we've been doing. Exactly what the fans want to have happen right now, which is fire Dan Campbell in his 2nd year. So let me remind everybody what has brought us to this point. Because since Wayne Fontes, and he was literally our last long tenured head coach. He was the head coach from 89 to 96. That's a long tenure in the Detroit Lions history. And he was a 500 head coach. After that, it was Bobby Ross for 3.5 years. It was Gary Moeller for a year. It was Morningweg for 2 years. It was Mariucci for 3 years or 2.5 years. Dick Duran finished off the year. Rod Marinelli for a few years. Jim Schwartz for 4. Jim Caldwell for 4. And then Bevel for a blink. And then you had, after Patricia, obviously, when that all fell apart, and then Dan Campbell. So you're looking at head coach after head coach after head coach after head coach. And they're all going to bring their own ideas to the party. Now, we can go look through all the different front office execs that have been there as well. There aren't as many. These guys seem to get a longer leash than the head coach will. But you are continuously rebuilding, or calling it a rebuild. I'm not going to call any of those a rebuild. That was just sweeping up the same old crap again and again, which is why I liked what I saw from this regime, for example, is that you are not just sweeping up the same crap. This was a complete fresh start. We got rid of our franchise quarterback that we had been praying and hoping for forever beforehand. Finally got him in Matthew Stafford, and we let him go because this was going to be yet another head coach for the poor bastard as the quarterback of the Detroit Lions. So now you have a fresh start right then and there. Now, people might not want to look at it completely as a fresh start because you got Jared Goff. The guy went to a Super Bowl and he's making all this money. And the Lions didn't sign that contract. The LA Rams signed that contract, or the St. Louis Rams, whichever one you want to call it. They signed that contract. Goff fooled them. Good for Goff. He's getting paid. He's not worth the money. And it's money, it's dead, it's cap that's going to get let go when he gets let go. And we can deal with the Goff lovers and haters later, but he's not the guy for the future. And now we are getting rid of the Quintricia guys that need to be let go because they weren't the right picks either at the time. But I'm seeing the right things happening in the sense of how we are building this team. You look at the 2 drafts under this new regime, and 6 of the 8 picks in this last draft were on defense. Well, guess what? The Lions have been one of the worst defenses the last 4 years. They were 26th, 32nd, 31st, and right now 32nd. Those are terrible numbers, obviously. And so you can't expect them to all of a sudden be a great defense. A defense takes time to build. An offense you can fix a lot quicker. You get a decent quarterback and a couple of pass-catching weapons, and you've got some semblance of an offense as long as the O-line can do some blocking, which we couldn't for the longest time, but it's looking like we're finally able to. But you look at what this regime has done the last 2 drafts, 4 out of 7 picks in 21, 6 out of 8 picks in 22 have been on defense. They are trying to address the problem. It hasn't worked yet. You are relying on first and second year players to be your leaders. That usually doesn't work out well in the NFL. It's usually the vets that are the guys that are the leaders and are leading the way for the first and second year players. But right now, our defense is so bad, we are relying on those first and second year players to lead the way for us. And guess what? It's not really working right now.
It's not working. And I think I don't even know that I agree with you in the sense that, give credit to Martha and Sheila and all of this. But I do agree that there's a way out. And there is a way that this rebuild can be different than ones in years past. And there's honestly some hope for Lions fans. So my plan, my strategy, my roadmap to success, whatever you want to call it, it begins this year. And now these things have to happen. And if they don't happen, then this is not going to work. Bottom out this year. You feel like you're probably going there at some point anyway, right? You got to get Will Anderson in the draft. I don't know if you have to draft 1 to do it, but you got to get Will Anderson. You get Will Anderson from Alabama, then you're looking at this defense. It was a very bad defense. But now you have a couple of linchpin guys, or guys that you at least think can be really good, right? You have Will Anderson. I don't think anybody thinks he's going to bust out. You have Aiden Hutchinson, who people might not be as high on right now, but you still got more than half of the fan base is going to be Michigan fans. They're still really high on him, and I'm sure he'll figure it out. You got Malcolm Rodriguez, who everybody loves, and then you have Jeff Okudah, who's shown some real good flashes this year. So you got 4 of your 11 players on defense that you think, hey, these guys can be really, really good. And now you got some other players who do what you want to do with Pascal. Or, Ruarie has been pretty bad. But Kirby Joseph, if you're excited about any of those guys, God bless you. I'm not. I'm just going to limit it to the 4. And you already have an offense, say from last week, that is destroying the NFL. So you're still going to have Swift, Amon-Ra, Jamal Williams, right? And now you're also looking at Jamison Williams, getting him added to the offense, and you have maybe the best offensive line in the NFL. So boom, right there, your offense is honestly probably a top 5 offense, even with Jared Goff at quarterback. And I don't like Jared Goff, but he's fine for this Lions plan that I'm putting together. So now, what we talked about maybe 2 months ago on one of our shows, we were super ahead of the curve, so shout out to us. You need to root for the demise of the Los Angeles Rams. Anybody who's still clinging on to Matthew Stafford, the Rams are 2-3 right now. They got the number 13 pick where it sits at today in the NFL draft. We need to root for the Rams to lose. Stafford already got a Super Bowl. Your opinion on him doesn't even have to change. I'm not asking you to change your opinion. I'm just asking for you to root for this man to fail and to keep us in that top, maybe it's not 13, top 15 draft pick territory. So now you're looking at Will Anderson. You're looking at Aiden Hutchinson, Jeff Okudah, Malcolm Rodriguez. You can add another top flight defensive player with pick 14, 15, 16, whatever you want to call it. And there's a couple guys there. You guys go look at mock drafts. The Lions need everything. So pick what you want. Do you want another edge? Do you want a defensive tackle like where Jordan Davis went last year? Would you like to have Jordan Davis on this team? Maybe you can go grab somebody who's like a Jordan Davis. Go grab another corner to put opposite Jeff Okudah. Go grab a safety so that these guys who keep getting burnt over the top, right? We don't have Tracy Walker, obviously, and we're starting Xavier Smith, who got carted off. So I wish the best to him, but he's not somebody who realistically should have been put in that position to play anyway. Grab any defensive player you want. That's the key, though. It has to be a defensive player. Don't tell me you're going to go get Jordan Addison, wide receiver from USC. I'm not going to hear it. It has to be another defensive player in the top of the NFL draft, right? So you have picks. Hopefully you get pick 1, but say you get another top 3 pick, Will Anderson, and then you get a pick in the top half of the draft, which is top 16. Now you're probably going to add that guy to the list of the 4 defensive players that you have. Boom, now you got 5 defenders who you feel like could be really good in this league. They're all on the defense. They're all going to be young players, obviously, and that's half your defense that is young and that it is talented. And the guys who are already here are going to take a step up next year. Aiden Hutchinson, he's going to be better than he is this year. Jeff Okudah, he's going to be better than he is this year. Malcolm Rodriguez, same thing. And again, if Will Anderson is the guy that we think he is, he can come in and make an immediate impact on the NFL right away. And then this next guy who comes in, who knows? It might be a crapshoot, but I guarantee he'll be more talented than Alex Anzalone or even, again, Oruwariye. Rest in peace. Like, he'll be more talented than any of those guys. It's just a matter of if he can convert that talent into production and into playing well within the defense. So doing all of this, that gets you your path, because then you have a top 5 offense and you have a defense who is young, is going to be super talented if things fall this way, and that is going to be able to grow together. And we've seen some piecemeal defenses work where, last year the Rams, they grabbed Von Miller, threw him on their defense. This year they tried to do the same thing with Bobby Wagner. Von Miller, he just got thrown in on the Bills defense. So we've seen defenses work that way, but it happens when you have the homegrown talent. When you have, I guess Jalen Ramsey was traded for too, but he had been in L.A. for a minute before they won the Super Bowl. They had Aaron Donald. So it's going to become like, basically, how can you do this? Can you get those defensive pieces? Can things fall right for you? You got to root for Matthew Stafford to lose, guys. I'm sorry, you just got to. And you got to root for the Lions to lose, which is obviously more likely than the Rams losing. But that is our path out of here. And then we can keep Dan Campbell, hopefully, or at least Ben Johnson, because he's a really good offensive play caller. And then we'll see if that happens. Then I think next year is the referendum year that we see on Dan Campbell, that we see on Aaron Glenn. Ben Johnson, to me, he's already money. He's fine. He's in the good portion of it. But Aaron Glenn, obviously, still a lot to prove, right? Dan Campbell, still a lot to prove. But I don't think, and this might just be the fan in me, I don't think the Lions have the talent this year, so I'm giving a semi-pass. Now, there are other teams who are winning who seem like they have a similar talent level to the Lions, young head coaches. We're going to get into other rebuilds in a second, but it's what people talked about, right? The Jets, the Giants. There's these other teams who at least now look like they have their stuff together more than the Lions do, and they're in similar situations in their quote-unquote rebuilds. But I'll give the Lions one more year, and if this plan falls into place, That, to me, is how the Lions can get into real contention, and it's how we can make this rebuild different from the regimes in the past.
But if you're only giving them 3 years, it's no different than the regimes of the past. The regimes of the past were given 3 years and then shipped. That's the way it's been. There's a reason that they were signed to a 6-year contract. It's to give this regime time.
If you're bad in year 3, if you go three straight years of just being trash, then you're not showing me anything.
So the offense improving from last year to this year. But they have. The offense has jumped leaps and bounds from last year to this year.
Ben Johnson's money. He's good. He can stay.
So it's just Ben Johnson. It's just Ben Johnson.
He's calling the plays. What are you talking about?
Look, I'm saying there's been improvement on this team. It might not be showing up on the final score in the wins or loss columns, but there has been improvement from last year to this year. At least offensively. Defensively, we're exactly the same right now. No, on defense we're not. But there's also but hang on. Special teams, we need a kicker. That's just flat out. We need an actual kicker. We've had kickers for so long. We're not used to not having a kicker. It's a weird place to be. But defensively, and you can call it excuses if you want to, but when half your defense is sitting on the sideline injured, the guys you were intending to play, these are the guys you were intending to be your defensive players, and they're not even on the field, that plays a factor in how bad your defense is. We lost more defensive players yesterday, including Okudah, who came back into the game. We had guys that got knocked out that stayed out. We had guys that got knocked out and came back in. Savion Smith, God, hope he's going to be okay. He got knocked out. Will Harris got knocked out. Melifonwu got knocked out. Okudah and Deshaun Elliott both got hurt in the game, but they came back into the game. Injuries do play a factor. Now, we are a bad defense with everybody on the field that we were intending to play. But when you have to back up those guys that you were intending to play because they were better at the position with guys that aren't as good, your defense is going to be even worse. So I'm not surprised that we have regressed so far defensively this year when we can't field who we expect to field on the defense. I am waiting out to see on Josh Paschal. We haven't seen him yet. I want to see him. There's a reason they took him high. They have a belief in him. I want to see what he turns out to be. I think he could be a reason that Hutch gets home more often. If he's good at his job, Hutch isn't going to be double teamed nearly as much if someone else on that damn line can actually do their job. Now, I want to get to what you were talking about with the draft picks and where we are as far as all of that stuff. The Lions are in a good spot as far as cap space. They're 12th in the NFL when it comes to cap space, on the top half of the NFL. So they have the room to acquire guys that can help this defense faster. Veterans who have done the job for a while, know their job and know how to do it. The Lions are in a good spot positionally as far as that's concerned when it comes to money compared to the rest of the NFL. A lot of teams out there have spent a whole bunch and are looking very bad when it comes to cap space. The Lions are in the top half of the NFL, so they have that to go along with whoever they take in the draft. I agree with you. I would love for Will Anderson to be a Lion. Absolutely. And then that next pick as well. It needs to be defensive-minded in my mind. But we've been seeing it the last couple of years. It feels like we're on the same page as the regime and the staff who have been focusing mostly on the defense when it comes to the NFL draft. So they're on the same page that we are on. It just hasn't panned out yet. Again, we are so early into this regime. There is a reason these guys were given a 6-year contract. It is to break the trend that the Lions have been on for the last 25 plus years. And old heads are going to say it's older than that. But in the 90s, the Lions were actually competitive. They were actually a good football team once in a while. They made an NFC championship game. Yes, it was 1991. It was a very long time ago. But throughout Barry's run, they were at least competitive and in the playoffs. They didn't win, and it's been a long time since we won. 1991, last time we won a playoff game, or it might have been the beginning of 92. But either way, it's been a long time, and I understand that, and we're sitting here still waiting for the next example of when we're going to do it. But once every few years of making the playoffs is not where we want to be. We want to be a competitive, consistent football team that is fighting for playoff position year in and year out most years. Very rare is there a team that does it consistently all the damn time. But to be one of those teams where you can at least be fighting for a playoff spot every single year, whether you make the playoffs or not, That's where we need to be. That's a first step to me. But you need to have patience with the regime and let them do their job through the good and the bad. You cannot overreact either way. And all we've been doing as a fan base is overreacting to these Lions. Oh my God, they score so many points. Oh my God, they almost beat the Eagles. Oh my God, we got shut out by the Patriots. Oh, the horror. It's Bill Belichick. He does his job better than anybody who's ever been a head coach. What do they do really well and what do we suck at? Oh, they run the ball really well and we can't stop the run. Guess what? They ran it right down our throats. Ramondre Stevenson ran for 160 plus yards on 25 carries, and the offense around it did their job. Bailey Zappe was poised in the pocket and did his job. He didn't have to throw that much, and when he did, it was for a lot of safe throws, playing off play action, and beating our defense in ways that makes it easier on the quarterback. They are good at their job. It's going to take a while for us to be good at our job. We need to have patience with the regime that has been put in place to get us where we want to go.
And not if the regime proves to you that they can't coach, though. Why are you going to give them 6 years if they just prove to be bad? Like that, so because, like that part doesn't.
Because we don't know if they can coach or not. We're in 22 games. How do we know if they can coach or not?
Oh, yeah, the decisions Dan Campbell's making, I think we're the lead.
Every single one of them is bad. Every single decision he's made is bad.
Dog, he kicked a field. He didn't kick a field goal. He went for it on 4th and 9, down 6 against the rookie quarterback. Yeah,
because he didn't. Because he's shell shocked. Doesn't have a kicker. He hasn't had a kicker.
He gave the Vikings a timeout that he absolutely didn't need to give them, and then coming
out
of that timeout, the Vikings scored the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, terrible.
He was the more experienced head coach in that game. The Vikings had a first-year head coach. They came in, boom. They didn't make that mistake.
I understand. We did. He has made bad decisions.
So
he's also made good decisions. But how many of those fourth downs that he went for and did get kept them in the game in the first place? Gave the Lions the lead in the first place going for those fourth downs against the Vikings.
Yeah, and then what happened? And then what
happened?
What happened when they needed to go for it on 4th down or at least punt it to have a chance to win? What'd he do?
There's been too many mistakes made. I can't even think of them.
Yeah, exactly. He kicked the field goal that missed, that everybody in the whole world knew was going to miss. He didn't go for it. He didn't punt it. He was like, you know what? I'm going to kick it. The one thing nobody wanted him to do. Like, he's a mistake waiting to happen, at least now. And maybe he gets better the rest of the season. But if he keeps coaching like that, I'm not giving him 6 years worth of that. And so you look at the other regimes, right? They got fired after 3 years. They probably should have been fired sooner. I wish we would have fired Matt Patricia after 1 year. I think we'd be in a better spot.
Obviously, we all wish they never even hired Patricia. 3 years. Yeah, we all wish they never would have even hired Patricia. But how does firing this regime right now, not even a full year and a half, we're not even at a year and a half yet into it, and everyone's already been calling for his head.
I said give him all the next year. And if we're still bad, if we're still a 4 or 5 win football team, and he's still doing the same, like, I don't want to swear, if he's still doing the same dumb stuff, you don't get 3 more years to be dumb.
How much better can this team be next year? What do you really see in the draft that's going to make the team this much better? Especially if you're going to keep Goff at the quarterback, which God willing, I hope they don't. But how much better can this team get? The defense need to all of a sudden be a hell of a lot better than they've been to give the offense a chance to win football games. We've been scoring enough points to win football games. The defense just isn't there. Whether it's from inexperience, health, or talent, or scheming, it just hasn't been there yet. But again, we are 20 games into the regime.
The defense can't be any worse. But say the Lions, again, right, go 3-14 this year, or 4-13, or something. A really, really bad record. If, again, next year they're 4-13 and the defense is still out here giving up 30 points a game, then no, they haven't got better. Do I think the defense can get better? Yes. Does that mean there's a top 10 defense in the NFL? No. But if they can even get into the top 2/3, if they can be 24th instead of, I'm sure they're 32nd right now. I didn't check. Yeah. I'm sure they're 32nd. If they can just get to 24th, that'll probably push them to 7 or 8 wins if the offense can stay the same, which, again, adding Jamison Williams, even getting a fully healthy O-line, because they still don't have that. Then DeAndre Swift, hopefully he's healthy for a full year, is probably not going to happen. But you start to add those pieces in it. You start to add those pieces together. That's an 8 or 9 win football team. Because we see bad defenses make the playoffs every single year. Not as bad as a defense as the Lions have right now, but that's where they can get better, and nobody's asking them to jump top 5 right away. But if Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, if next year they can't get that defense to not be just the worst in the NFL, right? Or at least be competitive with the bottom, the bottom 8 defenses in the NFL. Be interchangeable with some of those guys. I think that'll go a long way in helping your win-loss record.
Okay, so you're not asking for
regardless.
So you're not asking for obscene amounts of improvement. You're fine with being around 500 next year.
Yeah, of course.
So 7-10 to 8-9 to 9-8. Not 7-10. You don't want 7-10. You want at least 8 and 9.
I don't want 7-10. It's contextual, right? If there's something that happens,
right?
And it's they probably should be 9 and whatever. Like, yeah, that's fine, I guess.
Yeah. So you want to see improvement, and I get that, and I absolutely agree with you. I don't disagree with that at all. There has to be improvement. I agree. If we go 3 wins, 3 wins, and 3 wins in the first 3 years of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, something does need to change without it being absolutely injury riddled and losing everybody. But that seems to be getting lost in this year's shuffle so far, is that there has been great improvement on the offensive side of the ball. This time last year, the Lions were scoring 19 points a game. This time this year, including this goose egg, they're at 28 points a game. That's including this goose egg. So going into it, obviously, we knew they were the number 1 offense in football at that point. So we are seeing improvements in the Dan Campbell regime. It's on the offensive side of the ball, which is a lot easier to fix than the defensive side of the ball, a lot quicker fix than the defensive side of the ball.
There has to be still, even a certain level of improvement. Because, last year they were 0-10. Are they better than they were last year? Yes, because they, by proxy, that they have a win, right? And they probably should have at least another win this year. They should have had a couple wins last year. They lost to the Ravens, giving up a 66-yard field goal in a game that I thought Dan Campbell also flubbed up. But those kind of things just happen. So they're better than last year, but it's not even just, for me, it's not just, are you better than last year? Like, you got to be a certain amount better. If you went 0-10 again, I might say fire you this year. But they're not, so he's safe from that. And outside of the Lions going like 1-16, I guess I probably wouldn't say fire Dan Campbell after this year.
Okay.
Keeps making those stupid decisions, though. I might get there sooner than I want to.
One of the arguments that people keep popping out is, what about this team? What about that team? What about this one? These teams were all in rebuilds, and it seems to be the same names as far as the names that are being thrown out there. Giants, Jets, Jags, Browns, and some people throwing the Bengals in this mix as well. So I wanted to take a look at where each of these teams were. Now, the Giants are the only ones with an actual good record right now of 4-1. That's fantastic for them. And we can get into what's different about them. Some of the big things different with them is they're in their 4th year of their supposed franchise quarterback in Daniel Jones, who they're still not sure about. They're in their 5th year with their all-generational running back, Saquon Barkley, who's finally looking like the running back they thought they were getting 5 years ago. But this is a team that has had a whole bunch of turnaround as well. You're talking about since Tom Coughlin was their head coach from 04 to 15. You saw Ben McAdoo for 2 years, Steve Spagnuolo for part of a year, Pat Shurmur for a couple years, Joe Judge for a couple years, and Brian Daboll now in his first run with it. But the Giants are in the same situation as far as the cap space is concerned. They're one of the best teams with money that has not been spent and available to use for the upcoming season. But they're not in the same position the Lions are in. We're talking about a year 5 running back and a year 4 quarterback. It's a brand new head coach, but it's not a brand new GM. So they're in a different position than the Lions have been in completely at this point. Now you want to take a look at someone like the Jets, who obviously the big comparison because everyone was looking at Saleh to be the head coach for the Lions is a possibility. The Jets, also a different position. The New York Jets, same thing as the Lions, though. A lot of different head coaches ever since Bill Parcells was their head coach for a few years. They've had bad head coach after bad head coach. The best they got was a Rex Ryan who still couldn't get to 500, went to a couple AFC championship games with the Jets, but couldn't get to 500 as a record, not a winning record. Todd Bowles, not a winning record. Adam Gase, we saw what disaster that was. Saleh so far is 7-15. And defense is where apparently he makes his name. The Jets defensively this year are starting to look a little better. But there are just as many questions in Jets country about Saleh as there are in Lions country about Dan Campbell. We don't see them because our focus is on the Detroit Lions. But go look up some of the stuff being spoken about the Jets. Yes, they're happy about how they're looking right now at 3-2 and so far this year, but there have been questions throughout this entire season as well. The next one, to me, this is just crazy. You want to talk about the Browns, who are 2-3, have spent more money than God can even produce for this team. They have a top-end player money-wise at their quarterback, their running back, their D-line, their defensive backs. They've spent money all over the place to try and get out of the hell that they have been in forever. And they're still in it. They have one playoff appearance in the last so many years. They're not doing it consistently either. And I don't want the Lions to have we were good for this 1 year and then we're back to being terrible, which is what the Browns have been year in and year out for God knows how long. And then the last one is the Jags. The Jags, it's just, look, you went from Urban Meyer, who was an absolute joke, to a Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson, who has the credentials and has the wherewithal to be a good pro NFL coach. They have their quarterback of the future, or what they perceive to be their quarterback of the future, in Trevor Lawrence. And they have what is considered more of a soft rebuild than a total rebuild, which is where they are piecing together pieces from teams that were still there before and putting them together with teams that guys that are coming in now. But it's not a complete and total rebuild the way that the Detroit Lions are trying to completely from the ground up build this organization into something that's different than what we have seen for the last 25 plus years. As the 21st century came around, the Lions have been, for the most part, an embarrassment to the word football. And we are trying to not have that 1 year where Stafford and them, 2014 or 2012, whatever that year was, where we got screwed in the playoffs of the Cowboys and all that. Great, it was 1 year. What did we do otherwise? We didn't do anything otherwise. We are trying to break that trend, and that's where I need the patience to come in from the fan base. I'm never going to get it. There's no chance. Some feel the way I do, some don't. But as a fan base, we are trying to break a trend of what we've been for so long, and by doing it the same way we've been doing it doesn't make any sense. That's literally the definition of insanity, of doing the same thing again and again and trying to see a different result. You're not going to get a different result by continuously bashing who you have and giving up on them before there's time to actually see improvement. I think we have seen some improvement so far. It's all on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, there has to be improvement eventually. Eventually is not forever. I think we're going to see improvement by the second half of this football season, honestly. I think if our guys can get healthy, if we can see what Paschal brings to the table, which can free things up for Aiden Hutchinson to do his job better, because like you have said so many times already on this show, he has half a game of football he's shown so far this year, and that's it. PFF can grade him however they want. I see him overrun a rookie fourth-round quarterback, and the quarterback just escapes him very easily. Zappe got away from Hutch with no problems on that play that Hutch just completely overran him. He has been a little bit involved, but not as much as obviously we'd hope. And yes, he has been double-teamed quite a bit. Why? Because there's no one else on the defensive line that's really that talented, that's worth the attention that he is, apparently. I think Paschal will bring a different ingredient to the table, which will allow Hutch to do his job better, because Paschal is going to be getting some pressure as well. At least that's what I hope. That's what I saw coming out of Kentucky, and I hope we see it for him on the field for the Lions as well.
You do hope so. I guess one thing I would say is the Jags look better, and Urban Meyer was a dumpster fire, but they recognized he was a dumpster fire immediately and fired him. They didn't wait till whatever his contract was. I'm sure it was probably 5-6 years. Like, they saw it, they said, no, this guy isn't working. Boom, got rid of him. And again, now they're 2-3. The Jags aren't some powerhouse, but they have a lot to be excited about. And to your point, a lot of that stems from them having a young quarterback. Even with Trevor Lawrence, even with the Jets, they have Zach Wilson, who wasn't here for most of the season so far, and the Jets are 3-2. I would understand why their fans would be excited, but they're still, again, winning games with Joe Flacco. They just dropped 40 points on a Miami team that people were really hyped up about. The Giants that you mentioned, 4-1. The schedule they played is pretty laughable, but they've won 4 out of the 5 games. So, like, you can't, and they just beat the Packers. So it's not like all the teams that they're playing, they're just playing the 5 worst teams in the NFL.
Right.
I think the biggest difference is with the Lions. So these other teams are still bad. They still don't have a lot of talent. Not that I think the Lions do. Maybe the Lions were operating from the biggest deficit of any of these teams. Again, we just talked about 2 of those teams have a young quarterback that they still really, and the Giants don't, right? They didn't pick up Daniel Jones' 5th-year option, which kind of tells you everything that you need to know about how they feel about Daniel Jones. And I'm sure if their season went a little bit worse and they were in contention for the number 1 pick, like some people thought they might be, then they'd take C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, Will Levis, whoever ends up being the number 1 guy at the end of the year. Now, might they still move on from Daniel Jones? Maybe, but I think they just have a different reason to be excited, and their reason is probably the fact that they like their coach, right? Their coach is out there. Their coach is making some of the same ballsy moves that Dan Campbell is making. It's just working for Brian Daboll, and it's not working for Dan Campbell here in Detroit. And then again, we don't have that young quarterback to get excited about. If the Jags were 2-3 and they didn't have Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew was still their quarterback, there wouldn't be nearly as much excitement. But they see the growth that Lawrence has made, and they're still projecting him out in the future to be this great quarterback, and the Lions don't have that. We have that with Swift and Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams when he comes back, and Aiden Hutchinson. And there are guys that we feel like that about, but we don't think we have a franchise quarterback. Even the guys who like Jared Goff, they don't think that he is some like franchise-changing quarterback. They just think he's a good quarterback, much like you would think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, or how some people felt about Stafford. Now, people felt stronger about Stafford than they did about Goff, certainly, and they should have, because Stafford's a better quarterback. But I don't think it's unfair to compare the Lions rebuild to some of these others, and especially when you're getting frustrated because you see some of these guys who are second-year head coaches. The Jets kind of especially, where you look at Saleh and you thought, that's a dude that should be in Detroit, and then some weird reporting when it came out that Lions weren't so interested in him, and he was like, well, all about being a Lion here. And all of that, hey, this didn't happen, was essentially being blamed on the Lions. Like, the Lions just didn't like him as their guy. And if that ends up being a mistake and Dan Campbell gets fired after next year, and then Robert Saleh goes on to lead the Jets to back wild card appearances or something, people are just going to be mad that the Lions made that decision. And I think there's part of it that's fair. I think the most fair part of it is looking at, and when people say the Lions just don't have the talent, how can you expect them to win? I don't know that the Giants are so much more talented. Saquon Barkley would be the best player on either team, most definitely. But I don't look at the Lions and think, oh, that's just some team that's oozing with talent. Same thing with the Jets. Same thing with the Jaguars. They obviously had the number 1 pick with Trayvon Walker. But if the Lions had the number 1 pick, most of our fans would have wanted us to take Aiden Hutchinson anyway. They thought we had the best player in the draft. And you look at the Jaguars' offense, you have James Robinson, you have Etienne, but they don't really have anything wide receiver, right? They have Marvin Jones. Who else? They're the ones who paid Christian Kirk all that money, so their receivers are just like kind of whatever. Is sort of, I guess, in a similar boat with the Lions, right? Where you have Amon-Ra, who you think is really good, and then you're looking at Chark, obviously Jameson Williamson, not here yet. Then you got guys Raymond and Quintez Cephas and stuff. So I think it's more fair than maybe you do, but as always with anything in the NFL, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison.
I agree for the most part. The Jets one is a more fair apples-to-apples comparison because you have Saleh, who's in his 2nd year. Their general manager, Joe Douglas, is in his 3rd year, and he's been held to the flame as well. And I know we're trying to compare them and think that everything's all sunshine and rainbows over there and that it's all hell over here, but it's not. It's definitely not the case over there. He's in his 3rd year. His winning percentage coming into this season, he was 6-27 as they're coming into this offseason. So the Jets have not been good with Joe Douglas at the helm. They're trying to get better with Robert Saleh, but just like with the Lions, the Jets gave Douglas a 6-year contract because he inherited a bad roster. The organization's been in turmoil, and he is trying to take a slow, steady approach to remaking this roster and turning them into a winner. I think we need to be the same, and obviously the front office does. They gave that same contract for Brad Holmes and them all these years to try and actually build something, and we as fans, look, this is what we do. We react to what we see on Sundays. That's how it works. And we forget what happened the Sunday before, and we'll forget what happened this past Sunday in a few weeks as well, if all of a sudden the Lions start putting up 35 points and the defense somehow holds teams to 25 points and we win 3 straight. Like, all of a sudden it's all going to be forgotten. That's how we work. But you can't overreact either way. It's a slow process. It's not a quick process. And for people who point out things like the Bengals went from worst to first, the Bengals were in a completely different situation where you're talking about a team that consistently made the playoffs. Did they win a playoff game? No. But Marvin Lewis led them to the playoffs year in and year out before they finally said enough is enough and let's tear this whole thing down. And then obviously after the first pick with Joe Burrow, and then he got hurt, so it ended up being another bad year, so they could use another early pick, and they brought his wide receiver in, but then they went in the offseason and spent all sorts of money to build the team around him with veterans who've been doing the job for a while and can continue to do the job now in Cincinnati. The Lions haven't gotten there yet. We haven't went out and gotten the veterans that want to come to Detroit and make this team better. It needs time to happen, and we need to not overreact whether it's good or bad. My opinion, obviously, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, you always feel like we should give people more time, but you also can't. Again, just be out here making all these dumb decisions, and I haven't watched every Jags, Giants, or Jets game to know if their coaches are making similarly dumb decisions, so I guess I will leave that up to any Jets, Jags, or Giants fans that we have in the comments here to let me know that. But I would say that would be my biggest difference, because I would assume that even if they're making dumb decisions, it is not at the same frequency that Mr. Campbell is.
All right, obviously people are going, oh, the bye week's here, so there should be some people getting fired during the bye week, and we should have something different coming in after the bye week. I am not expecting anything of the kind, me personally. You expecting anyone to be fired?
No, I don't think anybody's going to get fired.
Okay. Well, we will be using this time wisely to get prepped up for the NBA and NHL seasons, which are right around the corner. So we'll be talking Pistons and Red Wings a little bit going forward over these next show or two before we obviously dive back into the Lions. And, of course, we'll preview the Michigan State Spartans football team and the Michigan Wolverines, who have a big game against Penn State coming up this weekend. We will be previewing that, obviously, on our next show. But that is going to do it for this show. I want to thank you guys for kicking it with Griffin and Bass. For Ryan Griffin, I'm Matt Bassin. As always, with thanks for the children. We'll see y'all in a couple days. Peace.
Hey, Ryan Griffin here. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of Griffin and Bass. Be sure to give us your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to click the bell to receive the latest notifications from DSN, and subscribe for breaking news, community blogs, polls, contests, and other content.